balance of the Force has been shaken. Clone Wars have begun.
Leader, you've got bugs on your tail! Take it down!
Alright, troops, make it count!
You've got a clear shot! Take evasive action! Coming around! Destroy him! My port engines out! My port engines out!
Fall of the Republic version 1.2 has been released, and there are some pretty massive changes to go over, from new units to unit and stat reworks and beyond. In this video, I'll be giving an overview of some of the biggest changes and some of the reasoning behind them, with more comprehensive changelogs available on the Discord and the Steam Workshop page linked in the description. If you're subscribed on the Steam Workshop already, you'll be automatically updated to the new version, and an additional download can be found on Mod Database. Both the Workshop and Mod Database copies will be linked to in the description as well. There are quite a few new units and heroes joining the rosters of the CIS and Republic in this version, including some which have been highly requested for quite some time. For the Republic, these include Ahsoka Tano, the AT-OT and UT-AT, clone jump troopers, and 8 other units that would just sound like alphabet soup if I tried to say them all out loud. There have also been several characters who were added to the Republic's custom command staff options, including Baraka, Wessel, Flurryvoru, and many more. On the CIS side, the bounty hunter Durge is the new major hero, though they also get 2 other heroes through the CIS Holdouts event and in other galactic conquests. For units, they've been given the long-awaited Dwarf Spider Droid, Ground Armored Tank, Proto-Deca, and several other options as well, including the MAF, which you may recognize from Battlefront 1. On top of these nearly 20 units for the CIS and Republic, there are additionally a few new units which were available via influence, like Mandalorians on Mandalore, and some other units which have been added to independent force spawns in regular galactic conquests, but primarily in From the Ground Up, being the TOG battlecruiser, Space Ark cruiser, and customs like Corvette, along with a plethora of infantry types and PDF or Planetary Defense Force variants of other vehicles, adding a ton of variety to fights against independent forces. On top of all these new units, several other units have had redone models and textures like the Secutor, Saber tanks, and the smaller Juggernaut models, or even new death animations added on the Golans, shipyards, and a few other units. A full list of all new and redone units is available in the change notes, along with the death animations. Some units have been moved around in tech level or availability to make room for some of these new units. However, the biggest change in unit availability is the A6 Juggernaut and the new Proto-Deca. These are both incredibly powerful 2 population cap units, which are now only available as rewards for completing missions, or occasional starting forces, rather than through regular construction like the A6 was before. In space combat, there have been some other pretty huge changes impacting how you'll play out battles. Chiefly, the way fighters, bombers, and anti-fighter corvettes are balanced has been overhauled. Generally, while spamming bombers could do a lot of damage over a long period of time, they tended not to feel especially interactive, and in most fleets with reasonable numbers of carriers, they couldn't be more than a support element. So we set out to change that this version, making them both a lot more fun to play with and against. Bombers have now been given 2 different types of more impactful ordnance: proton bombs, which are meant for more close-range engagements, and proton rockets, which are able to be fired from farther away. These new bombs hit very hard, especially on larger targets, but more methods are into counter bombers as well. They're much less effective on smaller targets than bigger ones like before, though they do area of effect damage, so clustered hardpoints can go down easily even on smaller ships. Bombers and fighters also die more easily when not supported, particularly in the giant furballs of fighter engagements that used to happen. These will resolve themselves much more quickly, being better for your CPU and also for unit performance. Most importantly, any ship with the rapid-fire laser weapon type, which would include things like anti-fighter corvettes for example, now has innate automatic point defense, and will periodically shoot down incoming munitions from both bombers and other capital ships. You have to think far more carefully about which types of units you're using in which situations. The loadouts of all capital ships for fighters have been similarly retooled, with anything classified as a carrier being the only place to get bombers, but with the carrier role ships having far higher portions of their loadouts being those bombers, usually a 50-50 split with fighters. If you want to use a bomber-focused fleet composition, the tools to do so will be much more obvious and viable without frying your CPU, but you'll also have to think about which situations will be best to employ that in. Weapon ranges and accuracy values have also been recalculated, with more emphasis being put on weapon types than on the tier being assigned to the unit itself, which is how we used to handle it before. Light weapons will now always be more accurate against smaller targets than heavier weapons regardless of which ship they're on, but they'll also always have shorter ranges, whereas heavy weapons are longer range but less able to hit smaller targets. On top of the general gameplay benefits there, this should help give players a better idea of what each ship is best used for at a glance. With the changes to the AI and the changes to make pathfinding err on the side of overlapping rather than being annoyingly spread out, which helps the AI group far more successfully as well, exercising proper positioning and making proper fleet compositions for what you're going to fight will be much more rewarded than before. The AI should also build more balanced fleets for both ground and space attacks. We found a few factors like coded tech levels that seem to have made the AI strongly prefer certain units, and we have now leveled those factors all off, along with making sure the attack fleets don't include more than 2 heroes and 2 battlecruiser tier ships like the Praetors and Lucrehulk battleships, both of which used to get spammed quite a bit. There will always be a bit of weirdness to how the AI chooses to build an Empire at War. There are only so many factors you have control over, but composition should make far more sense than in the past. Super ships like the Mandator also can't be as reliably used to roll over the opposition. Typically, because the Mandator, for example, is about 100 and some odd pop cap worth of power in one ship, you'd be able to send it into a battle, and even if it gets down to one hardpoint, as soon as that battle's over, it's back at full fighting strength, meaning you could immediately continue blitzing other planets. But now, if it drops below 90% of its health, that damage will still apply in the next battle. Every week, 10% of the missing health will automatically repair, at the cost of 5% of the ship's original construction price, as long as you can afford that. You don't need to move it anywhere, you don't need to activate anything, it will do this automatically. The damage level of your super ships can be seen at any time by checking the Galactic Stats tab on the left side of the screen. There are multiple buttons there that have a lot of useful information while you're playing, so make sure to check all of those regularly. Stations have been moved up 1 tier from where they were before, with the Haven and Trade Federation outposts becoming the new Tier 1 stations. At the top level, the Golan 3 has been swapped out for the Banking Clan platform from the 2003 cartoon for the CIS, and the Valour platform for the Republic from the second Clone Wars animated series. In the future, the CIS will also have their Golan 1 and 2 swapped for more factionally relevant stations. Overall, these changes to space have resulted in significant improvements for how both the player and the AI should expect to have their fleets composed and how they use them in battle. Jedi Hero starfighters currently remain an outstanding issue and basically just pretty transports rather than being units you're intended to use directly. This is something we will look to adjust in future hero passes in Point 3. On ground, major changes have been significantly more targeted. Planetary shields and ground-to-space weapons being able to prevent bombing runs or orbital bombardments, or both, have helped remove the ability to just sit back and wait at a starting landing zone and instead become a goal to achieve in the battle by knocking out those targets over the last release, but we've also made some specific AI adjustments to help the flow of ground battles. The AI will now spend the setup phase of the battle trying to take different points of interest, like landing zones or field bases, to establish themselves rather than having one unit at a time go at its max speed into your forces. This makes proactivity more important, but also means you'll generally get a much better, more concentrated battle at different points of interest, rather than finding those individual units throughout the map. Bob's also made the AI more prone to retreat in both ground and space when a battle is clearly over, rather than wasting your time having to hunt down a garrisonless building or a stray infantry squad, which has been a huge help to battle pacing. Further documentation has also been done within the battles for some of the secondary objectives like shields and victory points to help clarify them. and several new types of capturable structures have been implemented for extra variety on some maps. We've begun a concentrated effort to improve a lot of the ground maps, so you'll notice a lot of improvements there as well, while introducing some new ones like on Megiddo. We've made a lot of headway, but this is a process which will be ongoing over at least the next release cycle, removing some of the older and messier maps and trying to emphasize what makes each one unique or fun, while eliminating elements that can make ground battles in Empire at War feel like a slog or tedious. On top of this, a new skirmish game mode called Ground War, where you're able to field massive armies much like Space Supremacy from the prior version, has been added, allowing a lot more experimentation with units outside of Galactic Conquest. Finally, with Galactic on top of the new Operation Durge's Lance Galactic Conquest map, we've begun some major economic and infrastructural changes. Income levels for all planets have been recalculated and rescaled as the baseline for your economy, rather than using the structures for that, with economic structures being split into trade ports, mines, and tax agencies for everyone, giving different bonuses and downsides rather than just being factional reskins of each other. Mines give flat credits where they're available, tax agencies decrease influence while doubling base planetary income, so planets like Coruscant would benefit most from them, and trade ports give additional credits based on how many friendly planets are connected, so a world that is at the hub of multiple connections will be far more effective than one with only one neighbor. Many of the government mechanics for both the CIS and Republic have been adjusted as well, making the incorporation of the CIS subfaction smoother by having it happen one planet at a time, and making the Order 65 and 66 branching choices happen more reliably at a more reasonable point in the game, after spending most of the prior release being quite difficult to reach. Resources, rather than decreasing influence, now give you negatives to build cost and speed when in a deficit, making it both more forgiving for new players in particular, and giving us more levers to balance them around. These changes were all recently covered in a standalone video, so I'll spend a bit less time there. All of this together should help with a feeling of progression, much like the ground changes, and add much more consideration to the risk versus reward analysis of how, when, and where you expand, giving the AI more time to put together fleets to have better battles against, while also setting us up for the bigger focus in Point 3 on the Galactic map and hooks to link story elements into. This is, again, far from an exhaustive list of changes, so check out the patch notes for a more detailed breakdown of what's new in this release. On top of this overview, I will be putting out a few guides to both the factions and for beginners to the mod, for both Fall of the Republic now and Thrawn's Revenge when it's out, so if you find yourself with any questions about the mod, please give those a look when they're posted, or check out our Discord linked in the description, where active members can already see some of what's underway for the Point 3 releases, and get in on testing for Thrawn's Revenge Point 2 as well. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy the mod.